and welcome. We're excited to have you all join us for the first panel discussion, which is the first of four in our four-part series on navigating complexities in school leaders. My name is Charanya Ramesh, and on behalf of the Global School Leaders, the Education Commission, and the World Bank, we welcome you all to this discussion. Before we begin, just a couple of house rules. Please keep your microphones and videos off throughout the duration of this webinar. We will have a Q&A section in the end, so please use the chat box freely to send in your questions to panelists as you listen to them. Finally, we are live streaming this session on YouTube and LinkedIn, so do spread the word via social media channels of your choice, and do remember to tag all three organizations. I'm very happy now to hand over to Devi Sushanti, the Senior Director of Research at GSL and our moderator for today. Over to you, Devi.
Thank you so much, Charanya. So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. On behalf of the team here, we would like to welcome you once again to this webinar. I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and it is a pleasure to see some familiar names in the audience. Thank you so much for joining. And I know that there are quite a lot of school leaders participating in this webinar, including those from the TTL School Leadership Network. I hope many of you will be able to participate, if not in this series, but then if not all of them as well. So I would like to begin this session by framing our topic for this hour. In many low and middle income countries, school leaders are positioned as managers and administrators whose role is to lead implementation of various school improvement programs and government mandates. In contrast, there are those who think school leaders should have a strong vision, along with the ability and skills to make independent decisions to adapt to changes. The pandemic school closure and reopening have brought to realization of the need for school leaders to navigate across these various roles effectively. But are they sufficiently prepared, equipped, and supported? So today with our esteemed panel, we're going to explore this very complexity. We have three very distinguished speakers who will bring in perspectives from the policy, practice, as well as research. So our first speaker is Dr. Haji Ahmad Rafi bin Che Kasim, who is currently the Deputy Director General of Education for the Professionalism Development Sector at the Ministry of Education in Malaysia. He graduated from the University of Missouri, Columbia in the US in Information Science and Learning Technologies. Throughout his 29 years of service with the Malaysian Ministry of Education, Dr. Ravi has held several key positions ranging from research, school operations, and professional development. Our second speaker is Conrad Saki, who is the chairperson of Sierra Leone Teaching Service Commission. He holds a Master of Arts degree in education from the University of London and an advanced certificate in educational management from the University of Leicester. He is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, Churchill Fellow in 2008, member of the Society of Education and Training, Chartered Director, Institute of Directors in the UK. Finally, our third speaker is Marie-Hélène Cloutier, who is a senior economist at the World Bank. She has led various operational and analytical education programs in the East Asia and Pacific and the Africa regions. Prior to joining the bank, she managed impact evaluations in Zambia for JPAL. She also holds a PhD from the Université de Montréal, specialized in behavioral experimental and development economics. So before I invite our speakers to share their thoughts, I would like to remind the audience to please share your questions to the panelists in the chat box at any time during the discussion. So now I would like to invite the speakers to share their opening remarks on the role of school leadership. Based on the body of work that you have done, which school leadership roles have you focused on improving? What's currently working with the role of school leaders in your context? or like in your research and what isn't. So please feel free as well to bring in examples, stories, and anecdotes. Could Dr. Ravi please share your thoughts? Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, Ravi. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure and an honor to have me together with all these prestigious panelists. First of all, in my role in Malaysia as a Deputy Director General of Education for professional development, basically I'm in charge of teachers development, leadership and management, and professional, continuous professional development for teachers and leaders. So when we talk about the challenges for the school leaders, we came from a very long history of moving the teachers from a classroom teachers that teach teaching and learning into managerial posts. So it's a huge change for them. And traditionally in Malaysia, we choose teachers who are experienced, having a long experience and also performance to be appointed as school heads or school principal. And therefore, we found out that even though they are good, they have experience, but the term of service is quite short. They'll be appointed at the end of the service. So when we talk about initiative that they need to lead, we have problems to have a long-term initiatives. So in 2012 and 2013, Malaysia embarked and introduced the Malaysian Education Blueprint, whereby we did a huge transformation of our system. Particularly for leadership, we start to impose a certain program that the school teacher must go through as a conversion from a classroom teacher into leadership and management role. Because we know when you move into leadership and management role, there's a lot of issues facing for them. And one of the things that we saw that not every teacher can become a good school principal. Therefore, we introduced the program, what we call as the National Professional Qualification for Educational Leaders, or NPQEL. Since the introduction of the Malaysian Education Blueprint in 2013, thus far we have about 70% of our current serving principal who have been through this program. And we have seen some improvement in terms of their readiness to lead the school, not only in the management and leadership, but also in teaching and learning or in instructional leadership. In Malaysia, we have an Educational Leadership and Management Institute known as Institute Aminuddin Baki, or in short, IAB. The IAB is set up to prepare teachers to shift into management and leadership position since 1979. And the IAB provide a lot of training program for teachers, for managers, for leaders in several areas. And particularly for the school leaders, the training in terms of general management skills, strategic management, finance, law, human resource, and of course, instructional leadership is the main content of this training program that runs between 6 to 9 months long. And during pandemic, we do face some difficulties, some challenges, but the program is designed to run with a hybrid mode. So we have an online mode, we have a face-to-face session, and of course, we have also hands-on, on-site practical aspect in school. Therefore, by having this training as something as a foundation to move from being a classroom teacher into a manager and also an instructional leader, we can see huge progress starting 2014, where we start implementing the mandatory requirement for any school heads to be appointed. They must obtain that professional qualification. And we strongly believe that if we can enhance on this, then we will on our way to improve our education system. Uh, and we don't stop there. By having this certification, they can be appointed as the school heads, as a principal. But in addition to that, for the first 2 years, the beginners, the IAB still continue to support them through leadership coaching and mentoring. We have a special program called Residency and Immersion Program, whereby the lecturers from the IAB will go to the schools to support these beginners or beginning school leaders. So this kind of support is continued throughout the first 2 years in their own in their service in their various schools, and we didn't end there. After the 2 years period, those who need further support will be supported by our school improvement partners, or SIP, which are stationed at the district education office. They are those experienced, high performance school leaders that serve as a mentor to the beginning principals. So far, we have seen quite a huge improvement in terms of the principalship, whereby they try to balance out between managing the school with the administrative purpose, administrative task, and also leading instructionally, so that teaching and learning can go on and improve from time to time. But of course, during the pandemic, there's a lot of challenges for us, and we have tried many programs, we have tried many initiatives to fill the gap, particularly for those in remote and rural areas where it is hard to get internet access. And these school leaders, they do wonders. They find ways how to reach out to their children, because they are teachers at heart. So, I'm really proud of our teachers in Malaysia. They find ways to make sure that they can reach out to the students and make sure that they get something, even though we cannot get 100% as what we wish for, but they manage to do it. And of course, the IAB also provide a lot of training program, short courses for school teachers, for middle leaders, for senior leader team, and there's hundreds of courses available, whether it's face-to-face or online. So I think the support system that we built within the Malaysian education system is good enough to support particularly those beginning school leaders. And we hope that we will come up with more program to strengthen and to enable them to be better leaders, better manager, and better instructional leaders in their own school.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi, for sharing with us on the Malaysia Education Blueprint. So we will now turn from the Malaysia education system to Sierra Leone. May I invite Conrad to share your opening remarks as well in about 7 minutes. Thank you so much. Over to you, Conrad.
Thank you so much. And I'm most grateful for having this opportunity. Perhaps permit me to take you on a journey through the Sierra Leone educational landscape so that you see where we've started and where we are now. Post-independence Sierra Leone was popularly referred to as the Athens of West Africa because of its excellent educational system. During this period, school leaders were prepared as managers and administrators whose role it was to lead implementation of various school improvements and ministries' mandates. They were promoted to these positions through a very structured process. Management and administration was included in the pre-service training of all teachers, and they were also supported by very well-experienced school inspectors. Then In 1991, misfortune knocked on the door of Sierra Leone when the country experienced a brutal civil war which destroyed the educational infrastructure. Teachers and school leaders were killed, some fled to neighboring countries. And some of them never came back after the end of the war. However, as a nation, at the end of the war, the nation puts its shoulders to the wheel to build back better. But just as the populace thought that they were recovering from the perils of war, nature dealt the population yet another shocking blow. This time, it was the Ebola epidemic, which took another 4,000 lives, including those of teachers and school leaders. Consequently, schools were closed for 2 years. However, in 2018, the new government that came into power introduced a free quality school education system, which led to school fees and examination fees for each child being paid for by the government. In the most deprived areas, pupils were offered free school meals. This resulted in a significant increase in pupil numbers, including a significant increase in the enrollment of girl child, and in some levels of education, there were more girls on the school roll than boys. So, like the proverbial phoenix, Sierra Leone's education system rose from the ashes. But this success story came with some new challenges. And one of those challenges is we've had some issues around learning outcomes of our pupils. This formed the main focus of a newly launched education sector plan. It is against this backdrop that I would now like to share some of the evidence that we have relied on to design a resilient and a visionary school leadership model, which we hope will sufficiently prepare, equip, and support our school leaders to face the unknowns. Now, let me go through some of the evidence that we have. International evidence suggests that improvement at school level rarely occurs in the absence of effective leadership, which accounts for up to 20% of variation in students' learning achievement, second only to classroom teaching. Second, school leaders must have a strong vision as they help set a tone and culture for schools, deciding when they will be collaborative and inclusive or not. Most effective school leaders have a very strong moral and ethical purpose and a strong sense of social justice. And there are several research that supports this, this evidence. We also know that there is evidence that instructional leadership in particular has shown to increase learning outcomes, which in our case will meet our education sector plan goals. Instructional leadership can also include transforming schools into sites for professional development through mentoring and coaching, facilitating peer learning, and ensuring that teachers work collaboratively to facilitate improvement in instructional practices and encouraging a focus on shared goals. Again, there are a number of research that support this position. Instructional leaders also need to be able to draw on diagnostic evidence of performance, including lesson observation, learning outcome data, indicators of learners' well-being, equity, and inclusion, benchmarked against contextually relevant standards, and to select from a range of evidence-based teaching strategies. Of course, school leaders must also be able to fulfill management duties of running a school as well as, but this should not be a box exercise. It should be part of an overall strategy driven by data. There is evidence of the impact of school leaders using data for decision-making and school improvement plans, but they must be supported to do so. And there is research evidence to support that this position. Distributed leadership can also help. Evidence shows that distributed leadership from a broad range of roles than that of the head teacher and at different system levels can support deep learning and lead to sustainable improvements. School leaders are rarely supported or given the training in Sierra Leone, school leaders before now were rarely supported or given the training and professional development that they need to support teaching and learning and improve quality education. It is therefore with this foundation that in Sierra Leone we are now prioritizing support for school leaders. We are developing a national school leadership program to ensure that they get the initial training and continuous professional development that will lead to ongoing improvement in schools and learning. The program will also be based on a set of core competencies, and we have specifically focused on competencies so that school leaders not only have the knowledge around instructional leadership, but can demonstrate application of that knowledge and build the skills that actually improve teaching and learning and the school environment. The program will also include coaching and professional learning communities, which have been linked to school improvement. And there is a range of research that I can quote to support this. But this means that school leaders will be able to consistently learn from and support each other as well. So those are the sort of foundations that we have used to build our school leadership model. I thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Conrad. It's really great to hear from Sierra Leone about your experiences there, as well as what the government is doing. So we'll now turn to Marie Helen, who has worked in both regions. So we'd love to hear from you about the research that you have been doing there. Over to you, Marie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here today. Like it was just said, so my angle is a little bit different, given that I'm not a practitioner working in country. So what I've been doing at the bank on this work has been to work on an initiative that's called the Global Education Policy Dashboard. So this is a research initiative, a data collection initiative, and an analysis initiative to help the country find priorities for investment in order to improve learning outcomes. So the idea here is really that we've put together several indicators that are covering the system as a whole, and we're trying to collect data on those indicators to see where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, and to also provide a tool that can help monitor progress over time. So there are many indicators that are covered, and the 4 big domains are learning, teaching, inputs and infrastructure, but also school management. And we'll focus on the school management here today. There are also 3 different layers that we look into. So we look at the practice, what's happening in the school, but we also look at how the policies that are put in place on paper, in the regulation, in the law, but also how the policies are understood and implemented at the school level. And then we also have a survey that ask questions from public officials. So trying to see this connection, and this is something that Dr. Rafi mentioned, right, of the connection of what's happening in the district and what type of support the district officials are providing to the school and the school leaders. So far, we've collected data in 7 countries. What I'm going to talk about today is based on the data from the first 5 countries. So I'll present a little bit of those results, but quickly I wanted to go a little bit deeper in the school management indicators that we're looking into. And that echoes a lot of what Dr. Rafi mentioned, as well as Dr. Sake. In the studies that were mentioned are some of those studies that we've also used to build those indicators, because we're really trying to capture what evidence is showing us can be effective to improve learning from the school management perspective. So we have indicator on operational management. So what are the functions that are in place and what is their quality? So to what extent they are often carried out and in a timely manner. We have indicators on instructional leadership, which we agree is extremely fundamental to make sure that teachers are supported in the classroom by the leaders. We have an indicator on school knowledge, so the understanding from the school principal or school leader of what's happening in the classroom, what's happening in terms of inputs, but what's happening in terms of teaching as well. And then core management skills, such as problem solving and goal setting. On the policy side, we look into elements of the clarity of the function, so how the functions are well articulated so that the leaders know what's expected of them, supervisions, attraction into the professions. Are we getting the right people and the right candidates into those positions? But also the selection and deployment. So it's one thing to attract the right people. We want to make sure the right people are recruited and then deployed to the school. So we ask questions on that. And of course, we look into element of support. So the training that those leaders receive, both pre-service, but also in service. And it was great to hear about some coaching initiative. And so we look into that as well. And then some of the evaluation, right? So how are those leaders evaluated and what sort of consequences or implication those evaluation have, both positively, right, in terms of additional support, but potentially negatively as well in terms of career progression, etc. So in terms of results, quickly, I want to look kind of go over quickly what we have, and then maybe we can come back to this later and kind of looking to the future. So in terms of practice, interestingly, the school management indicators we have are performing relatively well compared to other aspects. So in the countries we've looked at so far, learning is generally pretty low, and teaching is really coming up at something that requires a lot of improvement, both in terms of content knowledge of teacher and practices. On the school management, operational management and management skills seem to be performing the best in general across countries, and where some caution or some improvement may be needed is more on the instructional leadership aspect and the school knowledge. We don't see a lot of differences between urban and rural areas, which is surprising. Again, in other aspects of the schooling environment, there are more differences than in terms of school management. There are a little, but they're smaller. In terms of the policies, what seems to be also working quite well is the attraction, the selection and deployment, as well as the clarity of function. But there seems generally to be more room for improvement on the support. So it's very interesting that we've talked a lot about that. And I think what seems to be coming out is not just the quantity of the support, right, but as well as how this is done and how continuous the professional development support is provided. And again, I also like the aspect of the competencies angle, making sure that it's not, when you do provide training, right, the focus is not only on the knowledge, but as well as the competencies and the skills that will really become something in the school and in the practice. Interestingly, though, when we compare or we look at the relationship between learning, the learning indicators we have are learning assessment at the grade 4 level in math and literacy and school management. There is not a lot that becomes significant, especially when countries are pulled together. So in a few countries, there are aspects that are significant, but as a whole, it doesn't seem to be coming up. So it would be great to, hear thoughts about this. And this is something I want to discuss a little bit further in my second moment for talking. So we'll come back to that. What else? So interestingly, though, school management is also where we see the strongest correlation with other practices in the classroom and in the school. And there might be here a really good explanation for that first puzzle, right? Of not seeing an implication in terms of learning, but seeing a lot of implication in terms of the other output. So the school management seems to be very essential into improving everything else that's happening in the school and in the classroom in order to eventually improve learning. So it's not a bad result in and of itself. So we see really strong results here. In particular, operational management is definitely instrumental for everything that's availability of input and infrastructure, but there's also connection to also the teaching aspect in the classroom. I'll stop here and continue later. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That is super interesting, and particularly in linking with what Conrad mentioned earlier, how kind of like the education policy in Sierra Leone is actually based on evidence. And it's great as well to kind of like hear from all the speakers, given what all of you have shared and what you're hearing from other panelists today. I guess, like, what sort of complexities around the role of school leadership do you think need attention right now and in the immediate future? What we heard so far is that there seems to be a lot of alignment on instructional leadership and the importance of providing support for school leaders, particularly the ongoing kind of like continuous development, as well as providing this like peer learning support. Are there like areas where you feel that there's like a bit of contention, or like that need more attention, or like other areas that you think would need to have more of a focus in the immediate future, particularly because as school leaders are coming out of the pandemic, we see that they are really struggling with a lot of challenges. So Global School Leaders recently conducted an annual pulse survey, which we will publish soon. And what we've been hearing is that, you know, they're like juggling with learning loss, with mental and emotional well-being, and they themselves don't get enough support. So it would be great to really like learn from all of you about your thoughts in terms of how to better support school leaders as they coming out of this, as we are all coming out of the pandemic situation. So maybe I would request Dr. Ravi to share again what is happening in Malaysia. Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, Dewi. Yeah, when you ask about the challenges coming out from this pandemic, that it adds more challenges for them. When we start off trying to balancing between administration and the instructional leadership, looking about learning, teaching and learning, but now we have to add more to it. So when we start opening up our school after almost 2 years of closing and opening up of schools, the one of the biggest, I think, challenges for our school leaders is to convince the parents that their children are safe to come back to school. So this is one of the challenges that we face. People are still scared of having their children to go to school, mix up with so many people after we have been so careful about social physical distancing, and it adds more burden to them. They have to make sure that the school is safe, and it needs to be perceived as safe so that they can convince the parents to let the children come to school. So at the ministry level in Malaysia, we try to support by working together with various agencies, especially our Ministry of Health, with the professional support, advice, recommendation from them, the National Security Council that set up the standard operating procedures so that we can have the children to come to school. So in the beginning, when we were so concerned about physical and physical distancing, particularly, we have to do a rotation. So instead of 500 students that come to the school, we have to cut it into half. half 250 come this week, another 250 come next week. So we have that rotation so that we can have distancing in the school. But it also creates some challenges for the school leaders, for the teachers, and of course to the parents as well and the students. So this adds to more complexity. But after going through these 2 years very challenging period, I believe it makes people stronger. They are much more persistent. And I just came back from a conference with the national school leaders, and they share some of their experiences and how they make use of that challenges. For instance, before the pandemic, we only teach face to face. We have our children in front of us all the time. But during pandemic, whether they want it or not, everybody have to jump into e-learning and start to use digital tools to reach out to the students. And now when we are back having physical presence at school, the teachers are using that skill that they learned within these 2 years that they had to learn, then they use it to enhance their teaching and learning in the classroom. We have flipped classroom, we have remote teaching, we have hybrid classes, and we have shared of resources. For instance, I spoke to a principal today. This principal, she has an excellent teacher, very experienced teacher, and she has a hybrid classroom whereby when this teacher teach, it broadcasted to another school. So nearby school and other school who did not have this good teacher can have access to this expertise. So I think that's one of the positive, a blessing in disguise from this pandemic that I believe in a way it is very challenging for them. It adds more complexity, but we do get some positive things from the experience, and I believe we can move further and improving. Maybe I stop there first.
Great, thank you so much. Perhaps I can now turn to Conrad. If you can speak like maybe around 5 minutes, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. I think for us, there's an old English adage which says that every cloud has a silver lining. And it simply means that every sad situation has a positive side to it. In the case of Sierra Leone, pre the COVID pandemic, we had gone through Ebola. So perhaps we were better prepared than most. There were some significant lessons that we learned from the Ebola period. Let me share some of them with you. When school closed during the Ebola period, which was for 2 years, we were able to set up a radio teaching program. And with COVID, we were able to resuscitate, if I could use that word, the radio teaching program, so that when school closed during COVID, we were able to still broadcast lessons to our students. So in terms of learning loss, it was not as significant as was the case in other countries. Secondly, we also experienced quite an increase in teenage pregnancies during the Ebola period. This time around, through the radio teaching program, we were able to target some of the broadcasts in that light to sensitize the general public and parents to these incidents. And so again, we were able to reduce the incidence of this. Certainly what we've also seen when school reopened after COVID, we did notice that only few people dropped out of school, which is a better outcome than even most people in the developed world. So there was some silver lining from that experience. And this is one of the reasons why in my opening statement, I decided to map out the educational journey for Sierra Leone. We've had some positives, we've had some lows, and we've been able to build up a resilience to be able to pick ourselves from whatever nature throws at us and survive.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm over, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you. We have a lot of questions coming from the audience. So maybe I'll hand it over to Marie Helen for the questions. Thanks.
Sorry, you want me to answer the question coming from the audience, or?
No, if you
Talk
can,
about the program.
if you can first, like, yeah, address my question first. Thanks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So I think I'll make just 3 main points. So the first one being on the policies. So one element that I haven't highlighted earlier was that we see a big discrepancy in many countries between what's happening or how the policies are interpreted in the school, and we call that de facto policies, right? And the de jure policy that is appearing in the document at the central level. So we think that's somewhere where there's a margin for improvement, and it could be relatively easy or non-costly to do, and that could reflect and impact a lot of the practices in the classroom. So that would be one angle that could be improved. In terms of, coming back from COVID and continuing to accelerate the learning, because there was clearly issues with learning outcome and the learning crisis prior to, but now is even more stringent. So I think 2 elements comes out strongly from the discussion. So one around the support, and I think doing more on that front is clearly important. And then having this link to the rest of the bureaucracy, I think really it has potential to have a strong impact on the quality of the support and ultimately how it affects the leader. And then third, I would highlight the need for data. And I guess coming from me is not that surprising. But I think, having a really good understanding of the system and what the school leader are receiving and where the weaknesses are can really help identify actions that on the margin will have the strongest improvement. And this is data on the practices, but also the data on learning, so that you can really, think through where to invest, where to send the funding that's available to make sure that you have a strong impact. Yeah, I will stop here and then let's go to the questions.
Great, thank you so much. No, so what I'm hearing is that a strong need for data, and it's great how Sierra Leone, based on the previous experience, have kind of like looking at how basically the current or like during the pandemic you can address some of these challenges, and particularly like from Malaysia, we learn also that how school leaders have to deal with like the safety of schooling as well. So I will now turn to the questions from our audience. So there is one question for all. What strategies can be used to encourage school leaders to build their capacity without worrying about administrative work? So that's one main question. And then for Dr. Ravi, there is a question on how have learner results changed in the schools led by 70% of principals that have completed the program. So there are also like some questions for Dr. Ravi with regards to who pays for the programs that you mentioned. So it seems like there's a lot of interest in terms of the variety of the Malaysia Education Blueprint reform that you mentioned earlier. And then for Conrad, there is a question with regards to what are the level of commitment and even engagement of school leaders to be instructional leaders? Are there any incentives that come from the government of Sierra Leone? And then for Marie Helen, is there any evidence of using ICTs to lessen the burden of admin-related tasks of school leaders? And also, has COVID made school leaders accept and use technology in a more positive manner? So I will now turn back to Dr. Ravi to answer some of this question, like the general one, as well as the one that is addressed to you. Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Okay, thank you, Dewi. I can see a lot of questions to me. Okay, the first one on the evidence on the schools. When we started our Malaysian Education Blueprint, it was triggered by our position in PISA 2009 and also 2012, where we were at the bottom 1/3 among the countries taking part in PISA. It triggers for us to change and transform. And having done that, having NPQL qualification is one of the strategy among other range of strategies that we did. We have seen some improvement. For instance, from the bottom third in 2012, now in 2018, especially for maths and science, we are approaching the middle. We are almost approaching the average score of OECD performance. So we are targeting for the next cycle, we will reach up to that middle range. And our end goal in 2025 to be among the 1/3 countries or system taking part in PISA. So we have seen some good results, but also there's some difficulties, especially in reading. We are not doing that well in reading. We have seen some improvement, but it's not as good as for maths and science. So there's some areas that we need to work harder and improve. So in terms of result, yes, we have seen the result by having these professional being trained to lead and manage the school. And therefore they can manage the teachers, they can lead the teachers, and we can see the result from having this a good, more organized manner. And people ask about the question about who fund this program. And when they go to attend this program, which seems quite long, quite lengthy, the National Professional Qualification for Educational Leaders, or NPQL program, is 100% funded by the government, because this is mandated for the teachers, for the principal, aspiring principals. So it's paid for by the government. So and it's run by a government agency, which is the IAB. So in terms of costing, the ministry bear the cost for training for them. The third question regarding the same thing, the administrative burden. While they're doing their job, administering the school, also leading learning in school, they're also attending a program for themselves, the professional program. And the aspiring principal selected for the program are those from the middle and senior leader teams. So they are not appointed principals yet. They are senior leaders. Whether they so when they do the training program, as I mentioned earlier, it's a mixed method. We have online classes where they are much more flexible to attend to after school or at night or on the weekends. They have several face-to-face sessions that were done on the IAB campus, which they are distributed about 5 campuses nationwide, and also on-site training where they can do the practical part in their own school. So they don't really have to leave the school. There's like a short 1 or 2 weeks where they go to nearby schools which with more experienced, high performance principal to learn from, so they can shadow the principal, so that they can travel within 25 kilometers. So it's a daily commute for them. But having this mixed method, it helps a lot. Initially, when we started this program back in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, it was like a 1 whole year program where they have to drop everything and they go to attend the program. And then 1 year later, they go back to the initial position and not guaranteed to be appointed as principal. So it was a huge challenge. We tried to do many ways of doing this, and over time we found that having a mixed method is something workable for us. It may not be the best, but so far we can manage, and we get quite a high number of applicants from the aspiring school leaders, as well as recommendation from the state education director or the district education officers who identify the aspiring school leaders. So they identify these people and they say, okay, they are good to become school principal. Why don't you go to IAB for this training? So we accept them, and then we use that the pool of aspiring leaders to go through the program. And once they are graduated, they become a pool for the district and for the states, so that the director of the state can appoint them as school principal. I believe I touched all the 1, 2, 3, 4
Yes,
questions.
thank you so much, Dr. Ravi. Conrad, over to you.
Okay. The first thing I would say is that the Teaching Services Commission, which I lead, has a professional standards for teachers and school leaders. In terms of the professional standards for school leaders, there are 4 main standards. The first one of which says, nurture self for leadership excellence. So anyone who is an aspiring leader or a school leader currently would make it their duty to improve on their own self-development. So that's the first one. The second is the fact that when you acquire a higher level of qualifications in our system, the Teaching Service Commission reassesses that individual for a higher level and for promotion. And so there's an incentive there for aspiring school leaders to acquire a new level of qualification so that they can move upwards. There is a third, and this one was not by deliberate action, it was more by an opportunity that presented itself during the negotiation that we recently had with the trade union during an industrial issue. And that was the fact that we agreed with the unions that we will develop a performance contract with our school leaders. And one of the parts of that performance is for them to improve on their own self-development. So those are the 3 ways that we have tried to encourage people to take this seriously. And again, you could see how an individual might voluntarily want to use this as a way of enhancing their own career progression. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Conrad. Now over to you, Mary Helen.
Thank you very much. So there were 2 questions. One is on strategies for school leaders to improve their skills without the burden of administration. So on that, I would say that's a very, very interesting question. I think it's a hard thing to do. And I would wonder if this is something that you actually want to do. So it's true that instructional leadership is very, very important, and that requires more support. It's more difficult to develop and make sure that it's present and of quality. However, the administration is also part of school leadership, ensuring that these aspects of the school are functioning, are not without purpose. So I would say it's better to try to kind of combine the 2, and maybe approaches of continuous support and coaching, instead of pulling the school leader out of the school and sending them to a training facility for a number of days. It is an angle that can be envisioned in that front, so that the work continues, but there is support coming to the leaders. On the question of ICT, that's also very interesting. And yes, there is evidence and there is data showing that that has changed since the pandemic, for sure, in an accelerated manner, but that was also something in the making in many countries. So I think we've seen a lot of investment in devices, to some extent in connectivity, and to maybe a lesser extent, or at least in terms of the quality and the extensiveness of it, in terms of digital educational resources. So on that input front, I think there's more there, and we see that school leaders are using it, and it's easier for them to use it for administrative tasks, so that you see more. When it comes to using ICT to improve teaching and learning in the classroom, this is a much more difficult endeavor. And there, what we see is the importance of having all the different layers in place. So there's need to be policies in place that really clarifies those standards that my colleagues were talking about, the standards and the competencies that are expected, and the way These are supported throughout, also monitored, right? And the incentive system in place. So all these elements that we were talking about for the Global Education Policy Dashboard in general also apply to the ICT angle. And then because once you're in the school, then it becomes, yes, how is the school leader supporting the teacher to use ICT in the classroom to effectively teach and support the student? And that's the difficult part. Over.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today, so we can't respond to some of the questions in the chat box. But thank you so much for the insightful discussion. And over to you, Sharanya.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Devi, and to all of our panelists for this rich discussion. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us and engaging with the topic. Please note that this is the first of 4 webinars that we have exploring the complexities of school leadership. Our next webinar is tomorrow, 2nd November, from 8 to 9 a.m. EST. If you haven't registered yet, please do so. The link will be shared in our chat box right away. And again, just want to say thank you so much to our panelists and to our moderator. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day ahead. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow.